It was a normal evening in a small supermarket on the edge of town. The lights were bright. The air was filled with the sound of beeping machines, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery section touched everyone who walked in. The place was busy with customers moving around, picking up their daily needs. Some people were smiling, some looked tired after work, and some were in a hurry to get back home. Behind the counter stood Daniel, a young cashier. He had been working there for 2 years. To many people, Daniel was just another face at the store, someone who scanned their items and gave them change. But to those who knew him well, he was kind, patient, and always ready to help. He had a gentle smile that made even the longest lines feel a little easier to wait in. Daniel had learned something important about life during his job. Every customer carried their own hidden story. Some came in with joy, some with stress, and some with pain. He did not always know what their stories were, but he could see it in their faces, in the way they moved, or in the way they spoke. On this evening, as Daniel scanned items for an older man who was joking about the high price of eggs, he noticed a young woman entering the store. She was not like the other customers. She walked slowly, holding the hand of a small child, maybe 4 or 5 years old. The child clutched a small toy in one hand and looked around with wide, innocent eyes. The woman's face, however, told a different story. Her eyes were tired, her steps heavy, and there was a clear sense of worry in the way she pressed her lips together. She moved through the aisles carefully, picking only a few items: a carton of milk, a small bag of rice, some bread, a jar of baby food. Every item she picked seemed to come after long thought, like she was counting each coin in her mind before placing it into the basket. She avoided looking at the expensive items, and when her child reached for a packet of cookies, she gently pulled his hand back and shook her head. The boy's smile faded, but he did not argue. He seemed to understand. Daniel kept his eyes on her from a distance as he worked. He had seen people like her before, but something about her felt different. Maybe it was the way she held her child's hand so tightly, as if she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Maybe it was the quiet sadness in her eyes. Whatever it was, Daniel felt something stir inside him, though he did not yet know why. Finally, after walking through the store slowly, the woman reached the counter. Daniel smiled politely, as he always did, and said, "Good evening." She gave a weak smile back, almost as if forcing herself. Her child climbed up on the small counter rail, swinging his legs, too young to understand the heaviness of the moment. Daniel started scanning the items. One by one, the soft beeps filled the air: milk, bread, rice, baby food. The basket was not full, yet Daniel could feel the tension building in the woman's eyes. When the total appeared on the small screen, Daniel noticed her expression change. She looked down quickly, opening her worn-out wallet. Inside, there were only a few notes and some coins. She began counting slowly, nervously. Her hands shook slightly as she tried to arrange the money. The child leaned toward her and whispered, "Mama, can we get the cookies next time?" Her lips trembled and she placed a hand on her child's head, whispering softly, "Maybe next time, sweetheart." Daniel kept quiet, but inside he felt a strong pull in his chest. He had seen many customers pay with cards, with wallets full of cash, even with laughter as they joked about buying too much. But this moment felt very different. Here was a woman who had picked only the most basic things, and still she was struggling. The line behind her grew longer. A man coughed impatiently. Someone checked their watch. The woman's face grew red, not just from worry, but from the shame of holding people up. She whispered to Daniel, "I'm sorry, I don't think I have enough. Can you remove the baby food?" The child looked at her with confusion. "But Mama, that's for me." His small voice was innocent, but it cut deeper than anything else. Daniel froze for a moment. He stared at the jar of baby food, then back at the mother. He could see her eyes watering, though she tried to hide it. He knew she was not just short of money. She was drowning in a life that demanded more than she could give. In that moment, Daniel felt something awaken inside him. He did not know it yet, but what he was about to do would not only change the night for this woman and her child, it would leave a mark on their hearts forever. The store, full of noise and movement, suddenly felt silent to Daniel. All he could see was the young mother, the small child, and the jar of baby food resting on the counter. A decision was waiting to be made, and it would be his. The supermarket was still busy, but for Daniel, time seemed to slow down. He could hear the impatient sighs of the people in line. He could see the woman's trembling hands as she pushed the coins forward, trying to make them look like enough. The child beside her was still swinging his legs, but his little eyes kept glancing at the jar of baby food on the counter, as if he knew something important was happening. The number on the small screen flashed again. The total cost of the groceries. To most people, it was just a number, but to her it was a wall she could not climb. She counted her coins one more time, whispering under her breath, "Please, please be enough." Daniel watched as she tried again, rearranging the money. She placed the notes down gently as if showing respect to every single piece of paper. But when she reached the end, the truth became clear. She was short. Not by much, maybe just a few dollars. Yet in that moment, those few dollars looked like a mountain standing between her and her child's meal. Her heart sank. She knew this would happen. She had done the math in her head while walking through the aisles, but hope had pushed her forward. Maybe she had miscalculated. Maybe luck would be on her side, but no. Reality was cold and sharp. The line behind her grew restless. A woman muttered, "Come on, hurry up." A man cleared his throat loudly. Another person looked at their phone, shaking their head. The young mother's face grew hotter, shame crawling up her neck. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the ground to open and hide her. Daniel's eyes softened. He had seen people argue at this counter, demanding discounts or shouting about mistakes, but this woman said nothing. She did not argue with the price, she did not complain. She only whispered, her voice breaking, "I'm sorry. Can you please remove the baby food?" Her words fell heavy, heavier than any scream could have been. The jar of baby food sat on the counter, small but important. To her, it was not just an item. It was a piece of her child's tomorrow. The boy tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, why? That's for me." His innocent voice cracked something inside her heart. She looked at him with tears in her eyes but tried to stay strong. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll manage." Daniel's hand froze above the scanner. He felt his chest tighten. He had scanned thousands of items before, but never had a single one felt so important. His eyes moved from the jar to the child, then to the mother. Her eyes were tired, but also filled with silent pain, the kind of pain that came from carrying too many struggles alone. For a moment, Daniel thought about his own life. His job did not pay much. He lived in a small apartment, worked long hours, and saved little by little. But he always had food on his table. He always had enough. This woman standing here right now did not. He wanted to speak, but the voice in his head reminded him of the rules. Cashiers are not supposed to interfere. Just scan, take payment, move on. That was the system. That was the job. But his heart argued, how can you stand by and do nothing? The tension grew heavier with every second. The customers in line shuffled, annoyed. The child's eyes watered as he looked at the food meant for him. And the mother? She lowered her head, her hand moving to push the baby food aside. Her pride told her to accept the loss. Her love for her child told her it was unbearable. Daniel saw it all. He saw the quiet battle she was fighting inside, between what she could afford and what her child needed. It was not fair. Life had cornered her into this painful choice. And in that moment, Daniel realized something important. Sometimes the biggest struggles happen silently, without anyone noticing. The air between them felt heavy. The beep of the machine, the chatter of other customers, the smell of bread, it all faded. The only thing that mattered now was the jar of baby food, the little boy's hungry eyes, and the mother's breaking heart. Daniel swallowed hard. He knew what was about to happen, even if he had not decided yet. He could feel it rising inside him like a wave, an urge stronger than rules, stronger than hesitation. But for now, he stayed silent, letting the moment stretch, letting the suspense grow. Because sometimes before kindness arrives, the world first shows its harshest side. And tonight in this small supermarket, the problem had fully appeared. A mother without enough money, a child with innocent hope, a cashier with a choice. The story was only beginning. The young mother's fingers touched the jar of baby food, slowly pushing it aside. Her hand lingered there for a second longer, almost as if her heart refused to let it go. Her lips trembled, but she forced a weak smile for her child. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "We'll be fine." The boy didn't understand. His little eyes, wide and innocent, kept staring at the jar. He knew it was meant for him. He knew it was something important, even if he couldn't explain why. "But Mama," he said softly, "I'm hungry." Those 3 words were small, but they carried a weight that crushed her soul. She tried to stay calm, to keep her voice steady. "We'll eat when we get home. Don't worry." But inside, her heart was breaking into pieces. The line behind her grew restless again. A woman sighed loudly. Someone whispered, "Why don't people come prepared?" Another man shook his head, tapping his foot on the floor. The mother lowered her gaze, wishing she could disappear. Shame burned her cheeks. She was not lazy, she was not careless. She was simply poor. But the world often judged without knowing the story. Daniel, standing at the counter, felt frozen. He was a cashier just doing his job. But right now, this job felt like more than scanning groceries. He looked at the mother's hands, pale and trembling, and at the child's hopeful eyes. He could feel their struggle as if it were his own. His heart raced. He thought of all the rules. He thought of the bills he had to pay, the savings he was trying to build. He wasn't rich. He wasn't a hero. He was just Daniel, an ordinary cashier. Yet something inside him whispered, "If you stay silent, this moment will haunt you." The woman tried to stay strong. She pulled the coins back into her wallet and said quietly, "Please, just the bread, the rice, and the milk." Her voice cracked on the last word. She was making choices no mother should have to make, choosing between food items when every single one mattered. Daniel scanned the items again, his hands moving slowly, almost unwillingly. The beep of the machine felt sharp, like it was cutting into his chest. He couldn't stop hearing the little boy's voice in his head. "Mama, I'm hungry." The mother took the bag of groceries, lighter than it should have been. She held it close to her chest as if protecting it, but her eyes betrayed her. Eyes full of pain, defeat, and silent cries. Daniel felt the struggle grow heavier inside him. It was not just her struggle now. It was his too. He thought about walking away, about pretending this was just another customer, just another day. That would have been easier. That would have been safer, but his heart refused. The little boy reached again toward the jar of baby food on the counter, still sitting there, unwanted but needed. His small fingers brushed against the glass. His mother gently pulled his hand away, whispering, "Not today." The boy's lips curved downward. He did not cry, but his silence was louder than tears. Daniel clenched his jaw. He could feel a storm inside him, the fight between his mind and his heart. His mind told him to let it go, to follow the rules. But his heart shouted louder, "Do something. Help them." He looked at the mother one last time. Her shoulders were heavy, her back bent with invisible weight. She turned to leave, her child's hand in hers. They walked slowly, step by step, toward the exit. Each step felt like the closing of a door Daniel could still open if only he had the courage. The world around him blurred. The impatient customers, the noise of the store, the flashing lights, none of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was a mother who couldn't afford food and a child who was hungry. Daniel's hand tightened on the counter. His heart pounded louder than the beeping machines. He knew what he had to do, but fear still whispered, "What if people laugh? What if they call you foolish? What if your manager finds out?" But then he remembered the boy's eyes, hungry, innocent, trusting, and he remembered the mother's voice, trembling yet strong, trying to hide her pain. The struggle was no longer about money. It was about humanity. Daniel took a deep breath. He knew this moment would define him. He knew that if he stayed silent, he would regret it forever. His hand reached into his own pocket, feeling the few bills he had saved for himself. His mind screamed one last warning. But his heart, steady and loud, said, "Do it." And in that moment, Daniel decided the struggle was over, or maybe it was only just beginning. Daniel stood frozen, his fingers brushing against the bills in his pocket. The weight of the decision pressed on him. The young mother was already walking away, her child holding her hand tightly, the half-empty grocery bag swinging gently at her side. The jar of baby food still sat on the counter, small and silent, but to Daniel it looked louder than the impatient voices behind him. The line of customers shifted forward. "Next, please," one man said, tapping the counter with annoyance. But Daniel barely heard him. His eyes were fixed on the mother. Something inside him refused to let her go like that. In that moment, the world around Daniel slowed. The voices blurred, the sound of the scanner faded, and all he could hear was the echo of the little boy's words. "Mama, I'm hungry." Daniel's heart pounded as if shouting at him. Do it. Now. Without another thought, he grabbed the jar of baby food and slipped it into a new bag. His fingers shook, not from fear of losing money, but from the weight of what he was about to do. He pulled out his wallet, opened it quickly, and slid a few notes across the counter. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The customer behind him frowned. What's going on? Come on, hurry up. Daniel ignored the voice. His hands moved fast, scanning the jar and paying for it himself. The receipt printed with a sharp click, and he stuffed it into the bag. Then, without a word, he stepped out from behind the counter. The store manager, standing near the fruit section, noticed Daniel moving but didn't stop him. Maybe it was the look in his eyes. Maybe it was the urgency in his steps. Ma'am, Daniel called out, his voice louder than usual. The young mother stopped. She turned around, confused, holding her child close. Her eyes widened when she saw Daniel walking toward her with the bag in his hands. You forgot something, Daniel said gently, handing her the bag. She looked inside and froze. The jar of baby food sat neatly on top as if waiting for her. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She blinked rapidly, her eyes filling with tears. I told you to remove it, she whispered. Daniel shook his head, a soft smile on his face. No, this one's taken care of. Don't worry about it. The mother's hand trembled as she held the bag. But why? Daniel paused for a second, then said simply, because you and your child deserve it. That's all. The little boy looked up at Daniel, his eyes shining brighter than the store lights. He hugged the jar tightly once his mother pulled it out of the bag. Thank you, he whispered in his small voice. The mother's tears finally fell. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. You don't know what this means to me. I can't repay you. Daniel's smile grew warmer. You don't have to. Just take care of yourself and your little one. That's enough. For a moment, silence wrapped around them, even though the supermarket was still noisy. People in the line stopped grumbling. A few even lowered their heads, ashamed of their earlier impatience. Others watched with soft smiles, touched by what they had just witnessed. The young mother pressed her hand to her chest, overwhelmed. She whispered, God bless you. Daniel nodded, his eyes steady. Sometimes we all need a little help. Today it was your turn, tomorrow it could be mine. The child tugged on Daniel's sleeve, smiling shyly. You're a good man. Those words pierced Daniel's heart in the gentlest way. He bent down slightly, looking at the boy. Always remember, he said softly, kindness is never small. Even the smallest kindness can change someone's whole day. The boy nodded, hugging his mother tighter. The mother wiped her tears quickly, not wanting to make a scene. She looked at Daniel one last time, her voice stronger now. One day I'll repay this kindness. I promise. Daniel shook his head lightly. No need. Just pass it on to someone else when the time comes. That's how kindness grows. She smiled through her tears. It was not just a smile of gratitude, but of hope. A smile that came from a heart that had almost broken, now slowly being pieced back together. As she walked out of the store with her child, Daniel stood still, watching them go. He felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his own chest. He didn't know what challenges she would face tomorrow, but at least tonight she would go home with her child fed. Behind him, the customers slowly began moving again. But something had changed. The atmosphere felt softer, warmer. A few people even smiled at Daniel, nodding in silent respect. The manager, who had watched everything from afar, said nothing. He only gave Daniel a quiet look, one that carried both understanding and approval. Daniel returned to his counter, his heart still racing. He was just a cashier, just an ordinary man. Yet in that moment he had done something extraordinary. Not because it was grand, but because it was human. And though he did not know it yet, that small act of kindness would echo far beyond this single night. The twist had happened. The story was no longer about groceries or money or rules. It was about humanity. The young mother stood frozen near the supermarket doors, still holding the bag Daniel had given her. The jar of baby food felt heavy in her hands, but not because of its weight. It felt heavy because of what it meant. It wasn't just food. It was kindness, given at a moment when she needed it most. Her son held the jar tightly against his chest, smiling in the way only children could. Pure, innocent, full of joy. He didn't know about money, bills, or shame. All he knew was that tonight he would eat, and to him, that made the world perfect. Daniel returned to his counter, his hands shaking slightly. He scanned the next customer's items, but his mind was elsewhere. He replayed the mother's face, her tears, the child's words. "You're a good man." It was a small act. Just a few dollars from his pocket. But to that family, it was everything. The line of customers had quieted down. The ones who had complained earlier now watched Daniel with softer eyes. Some even smiled, though they said nothing. It was as if the entire store had shifted, from impatience and noise to silence and respect. One older woman leaned over the counter when it was her turn and whispered, "That was a beautiful thing you did." Daniel gave a small, humble smile. It was nothing, but deep down he knew it wasn't nothing. It mattered. Maybe more than anything he had ever done in his job. Meanwhile, the young mother stepped outside into the cool night air. She paused under the streetlight, looking down at her son. He was hugging the jar of baby food like it was a treasure. His eyes sparkled with happiness. She bent down, brushing his hair back. "Do you know what just happened, sweetheart?" The boy nodded eagerly. "The man helped us. He's like a hero." Her eyes softened. "Yes, he is. And never forget this moment. Kind people are real. The world is not always kind, but there are hearts that shine." The boy grinned. "I want to be like him one day." Her chest tightened with pride and sadness all at once. She hugged him tightly, tears rolling down her face. They weren't tears of shame anymore. They were tears of relief, of hope. For the first time in weeks, she felt she wasn't alone. Back inside the store, Daniel continued his shift. To anyone else, it looked like nothing had changed. He was still scanning groceries, giving receipts, saying, "Have a nice day." But inside, something had shifted forever. He realized how much power a single choice could carry. How one small act could change someone's night, maybe even their life. A few customers who had witnessed the moment quietly nodded at him as they left, some even giving a polite good night with unusual warmth in their voices. Daniel didn't need praise, but he felt the ripple effect of his actions spreading quietly around him. The store lights hummed above. The steady rhythm of the scanner continued, but Daniel's heart felt lighter than ever before. Outside, the mother and her child walked down the street. They didn't have much, but tonight they had enough. And more than that, they had a story of a stranger's kindness. She knew this memory would live in her heart forever. The little boy looked up at her and said, "Mama, I think the man was sent by God." She smiled, pressing her lips to his forehead. Maybe he wanted to remind us that good people still exist. As they disappeared into the night, the jar of baby food safe in their bag, Daniel's act of kindness became something larger than he could imagine. It wasn't just about feeding a child. It was about reminding everyone, even strangers watching quietly in line, that humanity was still alive. Hours later, when Daniel finally clocked out and walked home, the night sky above him felt different. The stars seemed brighter, the air fresher. He had done nothing extraordinary in the world's eyes, but in his own heart he knew he had done something that mattered. He remembered the boy's shy smile, the mother's tearful eyes, the whispered, "God bless you." Those memories wrapped around him like a warm blanket, chasing away the tiredness of the long day. As he unlocked the door to his small apartment, he paused and looked back at the quiet street. He thought of the mother and her child, sitting down to a meal together, no longer hungry. He thought of the promise she had made. "One day I'll repay this kindness." Daniel didn't need repayment. He didn't need recognition. What he needed and what he had found was something deeper, proof that even in small ways, kindness mattered. And as he stepped inside, closing the door behind him, his heart carried a new truth. Sometimes the simplest act could be the most powerful. Because tonight, in a small supermarket, a cashier had done more than scan groceries. He had reminded the world that humanity always finds a way to shine. The night outside the supermarket was calm, the air carrying the gentle chill of evening. The young mother walked slowly down the dimly lit street, her son skipping happily beside her. He clutched the jar of baby food against his chest as though it were the most precious gift in the world. To him, it was more than food. It was hope. It was proof that kindness still existed. The mother, however, carried the moment in her heart like a fire. She kept replaying it again and again, the way the cashier had called out to her, the way he placed the bag in her hands, the way he smiled as if her dignity mattered more than anything. It wasn't the money that touched her the most. It was the respect. He had given without pity, without judgment. He had given with love. She squeezed her son's hand and whispered, "Remember tonight, my dear. The world may feel heavy, but there will always be people who lift us when we fall." The boy smiled, swinging his small arm. "Mama, I think he was a hero." Her eyes watered again, but this time with gratitude instead of shame. "Yes," she whispered, "a hero doesn't always wear a cape. Sometimes a hero wears a name tag and stands behind a counter." Back at the store, Daniel continued his shift. On the surface, nothing had changed. Customers still placed items on the counter, the scanner still beeped, and coins still clinked against the drawer. But inside, Daniel felt transformed. Every thank you from customers carried a new meaning. Every smile felt warmer. His heart was alive with quiet pride. When the last customer left and the store lights dimmed, Daniel finally clocked out. He walked home with steady steps, the street lights guiding his path. The air felt lighter, the stars above brighter. He thought about the young mother and her child already safe at home, eating their meal. He imagined the boy smiling, the mother watching him eat with relief. That image stayed with him like a gift. Daniel reached his small apartment, placed his keys on the table, and sat down quietly. The room was simple, a chair, a bed, a small shelf. But tonight it felt different. It felt full. He leaned back and closed his eyes. He had given away money, yes, but he had gained something money could never buy: peace in his heart. Meanwhile, at a small apartment across town, the mother placed the food on the table. The boy sat eagerly waiting. She prepared a simple meal, placing the jar of baby food beside him. As he ate, his laughter filled the room, a sound she hadn't heard in days. It was soft, cheerful, and it warmed the entire space. She sat across from him, her eyes fixed on his little face. Every spoonful he took was like a promise that no matter how hard life became, she would fight for him. And tonight she didn't feel alone in that fight. When the boy finished his food, he leaned against her arm and whispered, "Mama, when I grow up, I'll help people too, just like him." Her heart swelled. She kissed his forehead gently. "And that, my son, will make me the proudest mother in the world." As the child drifted to sleep, she sat by the window, looking up at the night sky. The stars blinked quietly, and for the first time in weeks she felt they were smiling at her. She whispered a prayer of thanks, not just for the food, but for the kindness that had carried her through her darkest hour. Back in his own room, Daniel stretched out on his bed. His mind replayed the little boy's eyes shining with hope. He wondered if the mother had managed to smile again, if she had found comfort in knowing she wasn't invisible in this world. And as he drifted to sleep, Daniel realized something profound. Heroes are not born in big moments. They are born in small acts and quiet decisions, in moments where one heart chooses to help another. The resolution was simple but powerful. A woman who had lost hope found it again. A child who might have gone hungry slept with a full stomach and a dream in his heart. And a cashier, an ordinary man, discovered that his ordinary job held extraordinary meaning. The supermarket lights switched off, the streets grew quiet, and the night deepened. But the ripple of Daniel's act did not stop. It moved forward, carried in the mother's gratitude, in the boy's dream, and in the quiet peace Daniel carried inside him. Sometimes the biggest changes don't shout. They whisper. And tonight, in the soft whisper of kindness, humanity had spoken. The night settled deep over the town. Streetlights glowed softly, painting long shadows across the empty sidewalks. Most people had already gone home, resting from their busy day. But for three souls, Daniel, the young mother, and her child, the night carried a memory that would not fade. In her small apartment, the mother sat by her son's bedside. He had fallen asleep quickly, a smile still resting on his face. His little arms wrapped around the toy he carried everywhere, but tonight his dreams were brighter. He had eaten. He was full. And his last words before drifting off were, "Mama, I want to be kind." Just like him, the mother stroked his hair gently, her heart heavy with emotion. Her life was hard, full of endless worries about rent, food, and tomorrow. But tonight someone had reminded her that she was not invisible, not forgotten. A stranger had seen her struggle, and instead of turning away, he had stepped forward. She whispered into the quiet room, "You saved me tonight. You saved us." At the same time, Daniel lay awake in his small apartment staring at the ceiling. His shift was over, his pockets a little lighter but his heart fuller than ever before. He replayed the moment again and again. The mother's trembling hands, the boy's hopeful eyes, and the simple words, "You're a good man." For a moment, Daniel had doubted himself. Was it foolish to step out of line? To break the unspoken rule of keeping personal life and work separate? Maybe some people would laugh at him, call him soft. But then he thought about the child, sleeping peacefully with a full belly, and he knew the answer. It wasn't foolish. It was human. The next morning, the sun rose as usual. The town moved on, people rushing to jobs, schools, and errands. Most would never know what had happened in that small supermarket the night before. But kindness does not need a stage. It does not need applause. It only needs a heart. The young mother, holding her son's hand, walked out into the day with new strength. Her steps were still slow, her struggles still real, but her spirit was lighter. She carried not just groceries in her bag, but hope in her heart. And she carried a promise that one day, when she had the chance, she would pass this kindness forward. Daniel, back at the store, returned to scanning items, greeting customers, and offering polite smiles. To anyone watching, he was just another cashier. But inside, he knew he had become something more. He had become proof that one person, even in the smallest role, could make a difference. And sometimes that was all it took to remind the world that humanity still mattered. The suspense of the night lingered like a soft echo. Would the mother be okay tomorrow? Would she find stability, or would life continue to press her down? Would the child grow up remembering this moment, letting it shape the man he would become? The answers were hidden in the future, unknown to all of them. But one truth was already clear. One act of kindness had changed the path of 2 lives and maybe more. Because kindness is contagious. The customers in line that night had seen what Daniel did. Some felt ashamed of their impatience. Others felt inspired. Maybe one of them would go home and choose kindness in their own small way. Maybe they would smile at a stranger or help a neighbor or show patience when it was easier to be rude. They might not even realize where that inspiration came from. But it had started in a supermarket, with a cashier and a mother who couldn't afford groceries. That is how humanity grows. Not through grand speeches or loud gestures, but through small sparks passed from one person to another until the world shines brighter. As Daniel handed a receipt to the next customer, his eyes drifted toward the door where the mother had once stood. He whispered to himself, he was just a child. She was just a mother, and I was just a cashier. But together we proved something bigger. The cashier smiled, knowing the truth. He didn't need a cape or fame or riches. To her and her son, he was a hero, and in the end, that was enough. The camera of the story pulls back. The store lights glowing, the city moving, the world continuing. Yet somewhere in a small apartment, a mother whispered prayers of gratitude. Somewhere in a child's dream, a cashier was a hero. And somewhere in the quiet heart of a man named Daniel, peace bloomed like a sunrise. Because this is what makes humans special. Not power, not wealth, but the ability to see another's pain and choose to help. Humanity, after all, is the greatest story. And on this night, in the simplest of places, humanity had won again.